Okay everyone, this is going to be a little demonstration of something that I actually teach at my workshops. It's usually the first little task or challenge or experiment that I get my students to try. Sort of breaks the ice, but it also just gives them a good understanding, especially if they've never used this Pastelmat before, and also if they haven't used watercolour pencils before. I did discover, obviously, on the US tour, a lot of people, when I asked the question who's used the pencils before, maybe one or two people put their hands up. Who's used Pastelmat before? Maybe again one or two people put their hands up. But when I asked who'd used both, there was no one. Well, actually no, sorry, there was a couple of people that had dabbled but really had not succeeded at home. So this is basically what I call a little pressure test that I get my guys to do. It helps them to understand what I mean by a light layer, in other words a light pressure layer. It also shows them how light a layer of pigment you can put on there dry, and then when you add the water how vibrant you can make it. And again, to the other extreme, it shows you how much pigment you can put down to get the most intense contrast or colour from your pencils. So I've just selected a range of 5 colours there and the black and white. Now, a good tip. So what we're going to do is put down about 1/2 inch to 1 inch depth of pigment, starting on the left hand side. Well, start on the left hand side if you're right handed, obviously switch over if you're left handed, work from right to left. So what I do is I say at the left hand side, if you're right handed, you start off laying down the lightest, least amount of pigment possible. Now with the Pastelmat, it's very tactile, it's very much about feel. So even if you can't see the pigment going on, as long as you can feel that nib of the pencil is touching the Pastelmat will be grabbing pigment from it. So I'm going to go in, again, another tip here as well. If you want to put down a light layer, the further up your pencil you hold it, the lighter the pressure. And as you'll see, as I come to the end over here to put down more pressure, I'll switch my grip, move my fingers further up the actual pencil, and this allows me to use that finger to put down more pressure. So, enough speaking, let's get on with demonstrating. So I'll start here with the white. So here, I'm going to just work from left to right, using the side of that nib, and as I work my way across, I'm gradually adding more pressure here. I think I might need to move my camera now, it's the light that's wobbling I need to fix. So as you come across here, again I can change the pressure, and at this end I add as much pigment as possible. Okay, my light was distracting me a little bit there by wobbling. So let me just see if I can fix that a little bit. If it doesn't, I'll just plug another one in as well. So I'm going to go in now with the yellow. So again, holding it loosely. Hardly any pressure at that first end. So I start to work my way across, starting to build that pressure. Now when I get over to this far side, switch grip. So this allows me to put as much pressure down as possible at this far end. Go in now with one of the blues, again lightest pressure possible. As we work our way across, start to build that pressure, start to move your grip further down the pencil to this point where you're pressing as hard as you can. So I'll go in with one of the maroony reds, repeat the process. And again, let's say the other thing with this, it just gives you a little bit of a feel that when you add that water, it will become really intense, and then as it dries later, it'll start to lighten. And when it first lightens, it almost looks like a bit like a pastel. It goes very soft, like a pastel painting. So when then I've done this, what I'll do is I'll sweep across the pencils. I'm using the Albrecht Durers here, the Faber Castell Albrecht Durers. I could have used the Museum Aquarelles, which I've got here as well, but it's just to show you the principle really. That with watercolour pencils, less is more. So I'm just going to go in now, one last one. Strip is the black. zoom out a tiny bit. There we go. Okay, so switching my grip again. I come over here and then press as hard. I did discover, obviously, on the workshops as well when I do this, some people the light touch is perfectly light, but then they seem to have the same gradient, same value. That's what we call it, the value. From here to here was pretty much the same value, and they just didn't realise that they could go in and press as hard. If you need to go back over it a couple of times, so at least then you know you've got the maximum coverage on that area. So I'm going to use a water brush now, literally just to sweep some water over. Now when we add water to watercolour pencils, literally all we're doing, or all I do, I'm not painting, because when I do my base layer, I'm being very careful to place the pigment exactly where I want it to be. So once I've placed it, and I've took all that time and attention and care in placing it exactly where I want it, with the correct amount of value, in other words the amount of pressure that I've put down, I don't want to then be shifting the pigment around with my brush. So I'm not painting with my brush, all I'm doing is going in and absorbing, dissolving the wax. The binder on there, these pencils, is a water-soluble wax binder, and that's all we're doing by adding water, is dissolving that wax. So with the lighter colours you'll find they go really faded, so I'm going to go in here. Normally the first thing I would say would be, when you add water, make sure you drop your drawing table down so it is flat, horizontal. I haven't done that for this demo because I say it is just a demo. I just want to show you exactly what happens and what I'm trying to demonstrate, so it's not like it's a real painting here. Basically, the only reason you put your table flat is because you don't want any mistakes by that water running down your picture and causing the pigment to run. That's all it's for. It's the only reason I say to drop your drawing board to be flat, horizontal. As you can see here already how intense this pigment is coming out, even in the area where you've got the lightest of layers on. Like I say, it will intensify now whilst it is wet, and then it will soften, and it comes with practice. It takes a lot of practice to do this. I know a lot of people online are buying these pencils. They've seen me and other artists now using this technique, using the Pastelmat, using the watercolour pencils, and I can see a lot of people also saying, yep, they tried it, they couldn't get on with it. Obviously I've got detailed instructions and tutorials on my Patreon channel for anyone who's interested. So on there you get not only the line drawing, the reference photo, full downloadable digital tutorials, but you also get voiceover videos that go into real detail on my technique. So here we go. I've added the water, dissolved the pigment, dissolved the wax, so now the pigment is lovely and intense. Just zoom in there on those blues. And as you can see at the top there, that white is pretty much washed out. So this is an opportunity, whilst it's still damp, and it is still damp, you can go back in with your white pencil, and if you want to intensify any area, this is when you can do it. So I'm going to go in here, and all I do is rub the pigment, preferably a flat side, onto that damp area, and the water, as long as it's damp, if it's wet it will just cut through the water, and you'll know that if it's gone too dry you're just not getting this release. I'm not putting, you see, I'm holding the pencil right up here, so hardly any pressure. I'm just letting that dampness of the paper and also the grip of the paper, the grit, grab the pigment, so I can just intensify that before it dries. And I often do this with the lights because they do fade out. Let me just go over here, should demonstrate really well there. That's just releasing the pigment. I'll do it the same with the yellow, the next one down that we tried. You just see, you can just increase the vibrancy. Again, this first way is you can use them dry. You can add water, which is the second way. This is the third way of showing you how can you use these pencils. So there, I want to just increase that vibrancy. So again, a light touch and it just releases that pigment. Okay, and what I'll do as well, if I come down to the black down here, I'll go in here, and once this dries it will be noticeably different as well. So I'll just grab here, it might be a tiny bit too damp, no it's fine. Just touch it into that damp area and let it release the pigment. Okay, so I'm going to let these dry now, and then I'll come back in and show you how I then interpret them to my students. So I say basically which area of the pressure scale we're going to be using. I know that some people when they teach they sort of describe this as the lightest pressure possible is making your pencils whisper, and then the heaviest pressure possible is where you make your pencils scream. So we're going from whispering, chitter chatter, normal talking, raising our voices until we are shouting and screaming with our pencils. So least amount of pigment, least amount of pressure to the heaviest, the most intense pressure. Okay, I'll just stop the video there and I'll come back when we're dry. Okay, so we're back to our Durer, Albrecht Durer on the Pastelmat now, and I added the water earlier, now it's dried. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can just see, especially up here on the whites. Remember earlier I went back in and I added in a little bit extra pigment whilst it was still damp, but you can just see here the intensity between, that's the very lightest of touch gone on there, so you can still see the pigment is still quite vibrant. Just trying to see if I can get down to the black as well there, and again, because if you layer these as well, I've got another piece here, I layered some on a previous little test that I did. So you can see here, if you layer some of the pencils over each other, this was a light wash here, so I've mixed a few different colours together, quite heavier pressure here, but you can like lay, I usually put sort of like, I don't know, between 2 and 5 layers of pencil down before I add the water, obviously slightly different pressure. What I do is I use my base, my support, in this case the Pastelmat, that is my palette. So I put the pencil down, the pigment down using the pencils, then I add water to dissolve the wax. So I mix the colours like it's my watercolour palette, my actual support is my palette. So if I want sort of a mid-tone, cool, bluey grey black, then I might put down some indigo, possibly a touch of black, but very rarely do I put black down. So indigo, a dark cool grey, I might put a warm grey over there, depending on where the light's catching it. It's perhaps a tiny bit of white if there's a highlight catching it as well, and then all those pigments all mix together once the water is added. So going back to our actual pressure test here, once I've got my students to do this, wetted, and now it's dried, I'd go back in and I'd explain that sort of this area here, I'm just going to literally grab a ruler. There we go. So this area here, very similar tone. I'm going to say this area here, I would call that sort of like pressure 1. So all of this is going to be pressure 1. Obviously ignore the bit where I put in some extra pigments. And then as it starts to build up a little bit across here, I'd say this is pressure, again I'm going to ignore those two because I've gone in and mixed the extra pigment in there. So if we look down here at the blue, the turquoise, the maroon and the darker blue, I'd say then this is going from pressure 2, 3, 4, 5, so perhaps about the midpoint here, so I'd take this down here. So when I'm applying layers, this is say layers 2, pressure 2 to 5. So when I say light layers, I usually mean between 2 and 3. If I say add a little bit more pressure, in other words medium pressure, I'm talking 4 to 5. So you can see there, that's the lighter pressure, there's your lightest, number 1, here's 2 to 3, here's 4 to 5. Then after this we start to build up. It's not that great on the camera, maybe the yellow shows it a little bit more over here where it intensifies. But then You see, this is just one layer as well. Obviously we can go in over the top of this with up to, I don't know, 25 layers, light layers, 2 to 3 pressure over the top of this, and gradually build until we've got the texture, we've got rid of the tooth, and whilst we've still got grit of the paper gripping the actual pigment. So here we've got pressures 5 through to 10, so if we go 5 through to 8 here, this is 5 to 8, and this is 9, 10 at the end, which is your most pressure. But again, you see, we need a decent amount of pressure down on some areas, and we need to build up the real dark shadow areas, because otherwise when we go in later on, say with white pigment or lighter pigment, we need a good base of dark under there, especially if we're doing fur, for the actual strokes to show up. But you see, on top of this, I would go in there with my dry pencils up here, and you could just then start to build your pressure again. So again, that's going in with like a 2 to 3 pressure, and just start to build those layers. Or you could just go in, again holding it quite loosely, and build it just using individual strokes. You can just see, holding it very lightly and just building it up. That's using, again, a 2 to 3 pressure. So hopefully that's just explained to you a little bit what I mean when I say use a light pressure, or in future if I say use pressure 2 to 3, that's your light layer. Use a medium pressure, so your 4 to 5. Start to build up a slightly heavier pressure, your 5 to 8. Use your heaviest pressure, 9 to 10, over here at the end where you're pressing, obviously, as hard as you can. Hope that helps. Obviously, if you want more information, please do pop over to my Patreon channel. I'm uploading more tutorial videos, lots of hints and tips videos just like this one, and you'll get first access there as well. Or join me over on Facebook, Animal Art by Law. Thank you for watching. Any questions, please do post them below. Thank you.